This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Sudan's ruling sovereign council finally formed with the military council head as leader. IGAD called for a meeting of South Sudan, Salva Kiir and Riek Machar's sides over lack of progress towards a transitional government. And South Africa announces discovery of a previously unknown dinosaur species. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. In business news, MTN overtakes Dangote Cement and becomes the most capitalized company on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And in your sports, Kenya begins trials for the 2019 World Athletics Championship in Doha. Sudan is today swearing in the military council head, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, to head the newly formed Sovereign Council of 11 members. The council will run the country for a transitional period and will be the highest authority in the country for the 3-year duration ahead of eventual elections in the country.
Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who is the head of the Transitional Military Council, will lead the established Sovereign Council. The Wednesday swearing-in of the members comes after the Opposition Alliance and the Military Council both chose 5 members each, in addition to a jointly agreed civilian as an 11th member.
The head of the Transitional Military Council issued a constitutional decree to form a sovereign council, and the members are as follows. Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan Abdurrahman, head of the council. Lieutenant General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, Lieutenant General Shams Eldin Kabashi Ibrahim, Lieutenant General Yasser Abdurrahman Hassan Atta, General Engineer Ibrahim Jabber Karim, Mr. Hassan Mohamed Idris Kadi, Dr. Ali Siddiq Dawer Kafi, Mr. Mohamed Al-Faki Soliman, Mr. Mohamed Hassan Othman Ali Taeshi, Miss Aisha Musa Al-Said and Miss Raja Nicola Abdel Messiah.
The agreement also provides for a 300-member legislative council to serve during the transitional period and a cabinet of technocrats with executive powers.
The head of the Sovereign Council will swear his oath ahead of the judicial head, while the members will swear their oath ahead of the Sovereign Council and the judiciary head. The Prime Minister will be appointed and he will swear his oath.
Sudan's main opposition alliance nominated economist Abdallah Hamdok to serve as Prime Minister in the country's transitional government. The main challenge for the new government will be to find solutions for the prolonged economic crisis created as a result of the lack of foreign currency. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
IGAD has invited all parties to the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the crisis in South Sudan to a meeting in Addis Ababa on August the 21st. According to the chair, IGAD's Council of Ministers, Gedu Andagashu, there is lack of progress in implementing the outstanding and critical issues ahead of the November 2019 deadline for the formation of a transitional government in South Sudan. The most recent agreement is facing implementation challenges, with neither side having implemented the agreement's safeguards, such as merging their armed forces designed to prevent a return to war. 2 more years of fighting left 1/3 of the pre-war population forcibly displaced and more than half food insecure. Well, CGTN correspondents have been following developments on this story. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi is in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, and Patrick Oyet is in South Sudan's Juba, and they're now joining me live for this. Let's start off with you, Coletta, because you've been following this from the seat of the African Union. What are we expecting from this meeting in Addis Ababa today?
Well, Beatrice, we expect the parties, the warring factions, that is the government of South Sudan and other opposition parties, to deliberate mainly on two things, and that's what IGAD has insisted. One is the operationalization of the security forces inside South Sudan, and by that they mean unification of forces, both the government and of the opposition, and ensuring that there are cantonment centers that are active, and ensuring that security forces from different parts are registered, and they are also put in a way that they'll be unified under one armed force. That has not happened yet. The process has begun, but it's still very slow. Secondly, they will be deliberating on the issue of borders, because at the moment we know that the South Sudan government is insisting that there be 32 regional states inside South Sudan, but the opposition insists that there should be only 10. So those are the two major issues that the Executive Secretary of IGAD, Mahmoud Maalim, has asked them to deliberate on. And they say if those two are solved, then it will pave way for other implementation, or for the implementation of the transitional government of national unity come November.
So, Patrick, looking at this from Juba's position, the two parties have been asked to deliberate on those two main issues that Coletta has mentioned. What are the reasons, though, being given so far for the lack of progress in the journey towards the transitional government?
Yes, Beatrice. The issue here actually that the government in South Sudan has been saying, and also the parties to the peace agreement have been saying that is a big challenge, is the issue of funding. They are saying they do not have money to carry out security sector reforms. For example, when we talk of security sector reforms, there's need for these troops to be put in cantonment site. These are camps where opposition troops are supposed to settle in, but these are places that have been designated in the bushes, so they need to be cleared. You need to put at least some water points there. You need to provide some medical services there. You need to also make sure that food reaches those troops that are going to gather there. You need to provide logistics such as, of course, uniform, boots for those troops. You need to provide them with some training. So this is an expensive exercise, and also the fact that donors are actually now somehow tired, because since 2013 they have been putting in money to get venues for peace talk, to pay for accommodation, to facilitate all the peace process, and the peace has not come to South Sudan. So there is some little bit of fatigue. So that's one of the reasons. The reason they're saying is the issue of lack of money. Another issue, of course, is the distance between opposition leader Riek Machar and President Salva Kiir, because many groups have been calling for this to meet regularly to start building some confidence, but this has not happened. Riek Machar is in Khartoum. President Salva Kiir is in Juba. They rarely meet. There are people who say also they rarely talk. So this is also pushing the peace process to move actually very, very slowly. So those are some of the reasons as to why the process is not moving very fast.
All right. Coletta, IGAD was categorical on the timeline for the transitional government formation. So what will happen now if the deadlines are not met by the two sides to this conflict? Because we know our previous peace agreement had also stalled.
Well, Beatrice, IGAD has made it clear, and not only IGAD, but it has got the support of the international community, and that means the United Nations, the European Union, and other donors. They have said that there will be no more extension, or they'll not be happy to have any other extension by the South Sudan warring parties. Because remember, they're supposed to have implemented this in May of this year. Then they asked for 6 more months, and that's why they're given in November. And when that extension was given by all the mediators, they were warned, the warring parties were warned that there will be no other extension. So IGAD today has spoken and says and has said that the warring factions should not be thinking of anything beyond November. They should ensure that today when they meet, at least they come out of Addis Ababa, because it's a one-day meeting. They should ensure that they come out of Addis Ababa with clear deliberations and clear implementation strategies. There will be no extension. So just in case the South Sudan warring factions do not meet the deadline, then they will be on their own, because all the mediators and other supporting parties have said no. And as Patrick has said, there is donor fatigue. The donors don't want to give in any money, because now they're telling the warring factions that we've given in a lot in South Sudan since 2013 and nothing is happening. And IGAD has also put an emphasis on the government, because we know the government promised $100 million to support especially the operationalization of security forces. IGAD is saying that the South Sudan government must give in their pledge. So there is no room for extension, Beatrice.
All right. So, Patrick, if there is no room for extension and November has been given as the final date for extension of up to November for this transitional government to be formed, if this transitional government is formed by November, as expected by IGAD, walk us through what happens next.
Yeah, if the transitional government is formed in November, of course, the formation will start with formation of the members of the executive, that is the president, the vice president, who are designated to be 5 in number, by the way, the ministers. Then they will move to forming the parliament, that is the members of parliament are going to also be appointed based on the parties they support and things like that. And then they form what they call peace deal institutions, peace deal implementation institutions, some commissions and so forth. Once this is done, then the government then has a lot of tasks to carry out. One of them is to ensure that the people who are displaced now, some are internally displaced, others are as refugees, their movement back to the country should be facilitated to come back and restart building their livelihoods. After that, there is also need for a constitution making, a permanent constitution making, because South Sudan is running on interim constitution or a transitional constitution. From 2005 to 2011, prior to independence, they were running on what is called interim constitution. After independence, transitional constitution of South Sudan 2011, amended in 2015. So now when the peace deal is being implemented, when the government is formed, then there is need to actually go to a permanent constitution making process. And this can only happen when people return home, because it's supposed to be a people-driven constitution. Then there are other things like, for example, things like census have to be carried out. Things like reforms in the financial sector have to be carried out. Then the current reforms we are talking about, such as the security sector reforms, also have to be continued. So a lot of things that this government has to do within this period, yes. All right.
Coletta, I do want to get a final comment from you, though, on how certain issues have impacted this peace deal and the formation of the transitional government. Riek Machar has been under house arrest in Khartoum. Explain to us how this has affected him and his allies.
Yes, clearly, Beatrice, and it has also affected the implementation of the peace process, because we know that once he's, under house arrest, he cannot do much. He cannot have meetings. He cannot push for anything. He cannot lobby for anything, because being under house arrest, that means he does not really have that voice that he used to have and that kind of impact that he had when he was not under house arrest. So much of what he's saying, or much of his ideas are not really reaching either the donor community with much force as he wanted, and that means that his forces are being weakened, and that's it. But that is also affecting because
Coletta Wanjohi there, apologies for that. Let's get a final comment, though, from Patrick Oyet, if he's still there. Patrick, how has that peace deal between President Salva Kiir and his former Vice President Riek Machar impacted on the South Sudanese people?
Yeah, the impact is clear here and is positive, because, for example, we've seen reduction in the number of roadblocks that used to be there. The roads are more open now. Aid agencies have been saying they have more access to places they did not have access to before the peace deal was signed. We have just seen a report today from the UN also saying that now the attacks on aid agencies have reduced. So things are moving better. People are moving. Some people who are in internally displaced persons camps are now trying to go back to their homes, beginning to do some little cultivations to start rebuilding their livelihood. So yes, there is some positive impact on the ground. The kind of gunshots we used to hear those days have actually reduced. People have also started moving at night between, for example, the capital Juba and the border to Uganda. Trucks move over the night without major incidences taking place. So yes, there are some positive signs on the ground. And now the hope here is that come November, let a unity government be formed, let the parties come to Juba, start implementing the peace deal, and total peace returns to the country.
All right, Patrick Oyet joining us there live from Juba, and Coletta Wanjohi joining us from Addis Ababa. To you both, thank you. A community-based reconciliation event in Juba's Rajaf County was held to encourage residents to meet in peace efforts following the peace deal signed last year in Addis Ababa. In celebration of the return of relative calm, traditional dancers from different ethnic groups entertained the crowds. The UNIMIS event was organized in collaboration with the reconstituted Joint Monitoring and Evaluation Commission and the National Pre-Transition Committee. The Peace Commission leaders also spoke to the grassroots communities about the last revitalized peace agreement signed in 2018 and distributed copies to the citizens during the event.
We are waiting for this peace. This is what we want in South Sudan so that we can rest. We have suffered enough with poverty, war, looting on the roads, no food, no water. I really want roads to be open.
As we now begin to leave behind the history of violence, we all South Sudanese must stand up to embrace and even kiss this peace, forgive ourselves and reconcile.
We are committed to working with you, the leaders and the citizens of South Sudan, as you chart your own path towards peace. It is not an easy journey, but the United Nations will continue to be by your side as a partner in peace. Thank you for your efforts. You have clearly demonstrated your commitments by being here today and taking part in this event to help bring durable peace to South Sudan.
Burkina Faso's President Roch Kabore says at least 24 soldiers have been killed in an attack by unidentified militants on an army unit on Monday. The attack took place near the country's border with Mali. According to a statement released by the military, 7 other soldiers have been wounded and 5 are still missing. The identity of the attackers or their affiliation has not yet been disclosed. The country has been battling a rising wave of violence over the past 4 years. Most attacks in the country are attributed to the Ansarul Islam group and to the group to support Islam and Muslims. The groups are believed to be responsible for about 500 deaths since 2015. Burkina Faso's main opposition party, the Union for Progress and Change Party, is now calling for the government to step down, saying it has failed to effectively counter the rising threat posed by armed groups.
At this point, I would like to reach out and offer my sincere condolences to all the families affected. I'd also like to salute the martyrdom of these men who fought in the defense of the country. The war on terrorism is a long-term war, and in this war, we will win battles and we will lose some battles. But what's important is that we win the war.
The United Nations says violence in the southern Libyan town of Muskuk involving air and drone strikes has left at least 90 people dead, displacing more than 9,450 others. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs has condemned the escalation in the small oasis town. According to reports by local media, the clashes involved the Tubut tribe and the self-styled Libyan National Army of Commander Khalifa Haftar, which in April began an offensive on the southern outskirts of Libya's capital, Tripoli. Amid growing humanitarian needs, the UN is calling for peace in the North African state.
All sides of the fighting have continued as a result of airstrikes by planes and drones, indiscriminate rocket attacks and shelling, and direct fighting on the ground. We know for a fact that at least 6 children 2 of them were killed, 4 of them were injured in a strike that hit a house hosting internally displaced people on the 8th of August.
China, South Korea and Japan have agreed to combine their strengths to help other countries tackle ongoing issues, both at home and abroad. Now, these and other agreements were reached as foreign ministers from the 3 countries held a trilateral meeting in Beijing's Gubei water town on Wednesday morning. Now, the trio agreed on a vision of the 3 nations' cooperation over the next 10 years and the cooperation of the 3 countries plus X, which pledged to assist other countries. Regarding the Korean Peninsula nuclear issue, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi urged all 3 countries to play constructive roles and facilitate dialogue on this issue. The 3 also agreed to finish negotiations of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership this year and speed up the 3 nations free trade zone talks. The ministers also discussed economic and other issues following their meeting. Now, during the meeting with his South Korean and Japanese counterparts, Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi urged neighboring countries to take a fair and objective stance on the Hong Kong unrest. Wang Yi said that the situation in Hong Kong has been deteriorating with the interference of outside powers. He said some extreme violence had gone too far and challenged the bottom line of the one country, two systems policy. The foreign minister said he understood the security concerns of foreign nationals and businesses. Their lawful rights will be guaranteed with the government's efforts to stop the violence. Now, protests in Hong Kong have been ongoing since June. The country's teachers' union has called for a strike this week, while the government has voiced their objection. Here's the Hong Kong SAR Secretary for Education.
We reiterate our resolute opposition to any form of student strike. No one should use the school as a venue for expressing their political wishes. The students are innocent. They should not be involved in any political vortex. Student strikes not only affect the functioning of schools and deprive students of their rights to receive education, but also bring stress and damage to the school's harmony.
South Africa has made a new dinosaur discovery. The species was found 40 years ago but went undetected in Wits University's impressive fossil collection. CGTN's Julie Shire reports.
PhD student Kimi Chappell was studying Massospondylus, the most common dinosaur species in South Africa, when she discovered Ngwevu Inhloko. The almost complete skeleton has been in the Wits University vault since 1978.
I digitally reconstructed it on the computer, and I got to see inside the skull and look at the bones in a very high level of detail. And I figured out that it's not Massospondylus, and it's actually a brand new species of dinosaur, which we decided to name Ngwevu Inhloko. So Ngwevu Inhloko means grey skull.
The 200-million-year-old dinosaur lived in the early Jurassic, around the same time as Massospondylus, but it bears similar traits to Sauropodomorphus found in China and in the Americas.
Ngwevu, for example, has different skull bone shapes. The two other dinosaurs that lived at the same time has different pelvis bones. Its hands are slightly different. About 5 meters long, so from tail to head. It walks on its back 2 legs, so it's quite high. It would probably be about 3.5 meters high. It has a really small head. A lot of these dinosaurs have really long necks and really small heads. And it ate plants, so Ngwevu's closest cousin is actually Lufengosaurus from China.
Scientists believe it could provide answers to the Triassic end, which wiped out almost all life on Earth.
These dinosaurs made it through the extinction. We need to understand how the community dynamics change after an extinction event. And also it tells us that we have more species of dinosaurs than we previously thought in the early Jurassic. So these lead to the big dinosaurs that we know that walk on 4 legs with the really long necks like Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus. And these are the largest land animals to have ever roamed the Earth.
Wits University's extensive fossil records has allowed paleontologists to conduct game-changing research on dinosaurs. Scientists are hoping this new discovery will provide more clues on the evolution of these magnificent creatures. Julie Shire, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. 80 migrants finally allowed to disembark after 19-day standoff near Italy's Lampedusa island. And South African fishermen increased their catch by taking up drone fishing.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Migrants from the Spanish charity ship Open Arms have finally disembarked in the Italian island of Lampedusa after nearly 3 weeks at sea. The move follows an order by an Italian prosecutor for the seizure of the ship and the evacuation of the migrants on board, ending a prolonged standoff between the Spanish charity and the government in Rome. The Open Arms ship, run by a Spanish charity, had been stranded at sea for the past 19 days. Spain yesterday dispatched a warship to Lampedusa to pick up the migrants. This news comes as Médecins Sans Frontières said on Tuesday that it fears another boat packed with over 100 migrants had sunk off the Libyan coast. There was no immediate confirmation from Libyan authorities on this. Turkana County in Kenya's northern side has suffered perennial dry spells because of its dry weather conditions that many deem unsuitable for food production. However, in recent years, locals have begun to tap into the rivers which run through the region to irrigate their farms and feed their families. CGTN's Wilkista Nyabwa has the details.
The water pipe snaking from the river to the farm carries the lifeblood of this farm. Turkana in Kenya's north is a semi-arid region. Historically, the Turkana people have always practiced pastoralism. But slowly the tide is turning, and the rivers that run across this region are at the heart of that recent transformation. The cowpeas are almost ready to harvest. This means a good season for Peter, who has leased a plot of land right next to the River Takwal. After a short stint working on a farm hundreds of kilometers from home, Peter returned to Turkana armed with know-how and basic equipment.
I use a generator to pump this water to the farm.
He experimented with different crops and settled on cowpeas, which mature fast. Locals also eat their leaves as vegetables.
We started with tomatoes, then moved to maize, and now we grow cowpeas. Maize needs a lot of fertilizer, while tomatoes need to be sprayed often, but cowpeas are easy to grow. They don't need to be sprayed and the seeds are easily available.
In recent years, the government has initiated at least 22 irrigation projects in Turkana County. Individuals have also invested in irrigation. However, there are still hurdles to overcome, including saline water and lack of quality seeds and equipment. Many locals are also reluctant to give up pastoralism and lack the know-how to embrace farming. But farms such as these are leading the way. Peter has employed locals to help him on the farm, and through him they are learning the basics. They sell their produce at the local market.
He sells to us at a reasonable price. Once he grew maize and gave me some to cook, it was very good.
With more support from the government, the farmers hope to grow more, to one day ensure an abundance of food and an end to the perennial drought in the region. Through irrigation, the farmers have been able to transform the landscape of a region once deemed unproductive. The once bare fields are now green with vegetation, spelling renewed hope for these families. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN, in Turkana, Kenya.
The International Conference on Biorefinery 2019 is currently underway in Johannesburg, South Africa. Biorefinery is the conversion of biomass and green wastes to valuable products, including heat, power, liquid and gaseous fuels and chemicals. This conference provides a platform for international researchers, investors and decision makers to meet and exchange the latest research and development in this field. CGTN's Yolisa Njamela has more.
This is the gathering that provides a platform to meet and exchange ideas and to reinforce all established connections and collaborations. Most importantly, to inspire more innovative ideas on the issue of biorefinery.
Towards this end, we have focused in particular on some biorefinery projects, which we regard as critical for creating opportunities that optimize socio-economic development, especially for rural communities. We believe that an integrated biorefinery approach can be applied across a number of market sectors, including chemicals, mining, health, agriculture, food, feed, pulp, paper, textiles, water, and energy.
During this conference, China and South Africa signed a memorandum of understanding for the establishment of the China-South Africa Joint Research Center of Clean Energy.
China has been committed to comprehensive green development, cultivation of clean energy industry, and overall source conservation and recycling. Internationally, China has been endeavoring for green development and construction of the Belt and Road Initiative. and working together with the international community to protect, to promote the green development.
In the future, maybe we can have some joint research and have some international cooperation project. Not only joint research, but also we say the joint cultivation of the student, and also especially young scientists. Yeah, this is very important. We must push this, and more cooperation between different countries, and we can solve the challenge problem.
As the fourth largest energy source in the world, biomass energy has become an important force in the paradigm shift of international energy consumption. Both South Africa and China attach great importance to research and development and industrial development of biomass energy and look forward to productive and effective ways of working together. Yudison Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And still in South Africa, it is becoming a common sight to see drones hovering over the coastline as the sport of drone fishing begins to take the country by storm. Now, fishermen have become hooked at the incredible ease with which they can now get their bait further out to sea without having the necessary elbow grease to cast that far. CGTN's Travis Andrews has the story.
Drones have shown what incredibly useful tools they can be in a variety of applications, including in the film and television sector. But put them in the hands of a fisherman and they could bag you this. Drone fishing as a sport has grown in leaps and bounds, and almost so than in the Western Cape, where the quadcopter's aerial abilities are being put to good use by delivering bait more than a kilometer out into the strike zone.
It's got a lot to do with the distance, so we've got bigger fish further out, and it makes it easier to make the 300-meter mark. I mean, most people can't cast that far, so it makes it easier for us. I target mostly sharks, which are sitting a little bit further back. You can get them closer in, but the bigger ones tend to sit on the back line a little bit. We try to get to those ones there.
The drones have been retrofitted with a fishing bait release system that allows the fishermen to pinpoint precisely which areas of the reef they would like to target. Catching elephant tuna was once only a dream for rock surf anglers. Now, though, with the drones' help, they can target them far beyond the back line.
I believe that we're going to see an increase in the sport itself, where people are bringing technology into the game. We do love what we do. It's high risk, so we're still flying expensive pieces of equipment over the ocean, which can ultimately cost you. But if you know what you're doing, it's going to make the game fun.
Dedicated drone fishing competitions also cropping up as well, as more of these handy machines get put to good use. South Africa's drone laws are fairly liberal regarding its use here at the beach, and as long as one has a valid fishing permit, it's okay to use them in this sport. And the price of this technology is rapidly decreasing, with most of the drone fishing accessories on the market made right here by Cape Town Company, which exports globally as well.
Total over the last 3 years has been in the region of 6,000 to 8,000 units. But I mean, these aren't cheap units. They're priced at $160, $200. With the introduction of the Gannet Sport, that model is now like really changing the game because we're up at a price point of $69. So we are bringing affordable, safe drone fishing to the market.
While drone fishing as a sport is being encouraged, so is responsible fishing practices, so that the next generation can also get to enjoy what it's like to have that eye in the sky with the big bait for a hungry fish. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
And we still have more news for you here in the program. Here's what's ahead. Sasol denies sharing new price-sensitive information with some of its investors. And MTN overtakes Dangote Cement and becomes the most capitalized company on the Nigerian Stock Exchange.
Nigeria is my home. 160 million vibrant, ambitious individuals constantly seeking the perfect self-expression. It is these people who inspired me to be that person that is seen, to be a voice that is heard, and ultimately to be the anchor that I am. I have to tap in tune in and turn on the very best qualities within me to deliver the news. I'm Richard Nta, an anchor for CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The world's biggest motor fuel maker, Sasol, says it did not share any new price-sensitive information with certain investors. The South African firm's latest sentiment comes after analysts complained that its private discussions with some shareholders prejudiced others. Last week, Sasol delayed the release of its full-year earnings report by a month to allow more time for the completion of a probe into its chemical plant in the U.S. The firm, whose shares fell sharply after the announcement, then held talks with certain investors. But some market commentators complained that this flouted the JSE's rules, citing that investors may have been aware of price-sensitive information. And staying in South Africa, the concept of writing off debts of low-income earners as foreseen in the country's newly signed debt relief bill may seem like a good idea, but the reality is far from that. Experts believe the new law will harm South Africa and may ultimately lead to a further credit downgrade. Here's CGTN's Angelo Coppola.
It's good news for consumers that fall into those categories, but the National Treasury estimates that debt relief proposals could result in write-offs of anything between $950 million and $1.5 billion of debt, and the banks aren't happy about this.
There are written contracts that mean there's a payment's got to be paid off over time by law. To say we're cancelling those contracts, well, who is going to suffer? The banking sector itself, but not only the banking sector, because their ability to advance credit to the more reputable borrowers is now going to be impacted because the banks have had to take a possible thundering great loss.
We believe it's bad because it brings significant risk into the system, gives the minister significant powers to actually raise the thresholds from 7,500 rand to something else and so on. It actually creates moral hazard in that you're sending out a message that, well, you can borrow money, and if you're not managing your money well under certain circumstances, you don't have to pay it back.
The opposition DA party is concerned that the act will create the appetite among low-income earners to incur more debt with no intention of ever paying it back, creating a massive moral hazard. The lenders responsible for those predatory practices, though, have a lot to answer for.
The problem is that they've been going to those who have been willing to lend to them almost recklessly. They've been lending to them at interest rates which have accumulated interest at such a rate that they now can't afford to pay off the interest on the outstanding debt, never mind the outstanding debt itself.
It's not good for responsible borrowers because it creates hazard there. And it actually sends out a message that we're interfering in what the market can sort out.
Trade Union Federation COSATU says it's one of the most pro-poor and pro-worker acts to be passed by the country's parliament. That there's a bigger issue facing banks, consumers and the country.
So all of that put together could result in banks being very reluctant to lend in that market, if at all. If they do lend, they'll price for the risk and then that will go up. And what that means is that you're actually crowding out low-income borrowers from the formal sector.
Moral hazard and risk are words that are being introduced into the financial services sector, something that the ratings agencies don't want to hear. But for those who are indebted, it's a sense of relief that they're starting to feel. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The government of Zimbabwe is planning to award its civil servants a pay increase. However, the country has been warned against committing beyond its means. The International Monetary Fund has urged Zimbabwe to reject its pay boost plan unless it has a sufficient tax revenue to do so. From Harare, here's CGTN's Farai Mwakutuya.
Civil servants want the value of their October 2018 salaries restored. Now, back then, the local currency and US dollars were at par. They say that the rapid depreciation of the local unit since then has eroded their wages and left them incapacitated. Now, if their demands are to be met, that could mean a tenfold increment, something that government, in trying to appease the workers, has been cautioned not to do.
Our local currency is so far depreciated 9 times thereabouts. So it doesn't follow that the government should increase salaries 9 times. Because if you increase salaries 9 times, this will lead to an increase in the prices, which will call for another round of increase in salaries, which will call for another round of increase in prices.
Apart from spawning a wage price spiral that could also cause a fallout with the International Monetary Fund, which has so far backed a raft of economic reforms. With pressure mounting from workers and the threat of more protests on one hand, and the risk of jeopardizing an IMF staff-monitored program on the other, Treasury has some tough decisions to make. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
South African telecoms firm MTN Nigeria has leapt past Dangote Cement to become the most capitalized company on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. At the close of trading on Tuesday, the network company's market capitalization peaked at $7.788 billion, surpassing the previous day of trading, which was $7.445 billion. MTN Nigeria listed on the NSE after the Nigerian Communications Commission fined the company $2.8 billion for the deactivation of more than 5 million unregistered SIM cards in 2015. The commission later reduced the fine to $910 million following months of negotiations and diplomatic intervention. Now, Apple has a new product rolling out this month. It is not a device or a software. It's a credit card. How exactly does it play into the tech giant's long-term strategy? CGTN's Mark New has the details.
Introducing a brand new service, and we call it Apple Card.
Apple has launched the new card for all its U.S. customers, partnering with MasterCard and Goldman Sachs to introduce the sleek titanium laser-etched Apple Card.
I think this will likely be the fastest growing credit card in history. I don't think any other credit card will match the speed of how quick this will likely grow.
Venture capitalist John Meyer says via Apple Wallet, it took him less than 30 seconds to apply for a card.
Because Apple on your phone already has your personal information, the form's already filled out. All you really have to do is sign up, enter your Social Security, and from there you get presented with an offer that you can accept, and then you get a card in the mail.
Unlike almost all other major credit cards, Apple and Goldman Sachs say they will not share your personal information. The card also has no late fees, no annual fees, and encourages users to pay less interest. Via Skype, I asked Ted Rossman of creditcards.com how the companies will make money off this card.
I think that's an open question. I don't really think that this card is going to be a big moneymaker for Goldman or for Apple. I think both are playing the long game. For Goldman, it's their entree into consumer finance, consumer credit cards. For Apple, I think it's part of this longer-term view towards the payment ecosystem.
The Apple Card offers 1% cash back when you use the physical card, 2% cash back when using Apple Pay, and 3% when buying something from Apple. Rossman says while Apple is known for targeting affluent customers, this time it's going for a broader base.
I'm starting to think of this less as a card for the rewards chasers, because they can do better with other cards, but more of an option for people that are new to credit or rebuilding credit.
Recent earnings reports show Apple iPhone sales are falling, while its services revenues continue to rise. But venture capitalist Meyer says the two are intertwined, just like the Apple Card is with the iPhone.
They've designed this so that if you get rid of your iPhone, you literally can't even pay the bill. And so it's probably one of the strongest forces in the future to keeping people on iOS versus switching to Android.
So while it might look like Apple is creating a new revenue stream by getting into banking, the card may actually be a way to boost sales of its core product, the iPhone. Mark New, CGTN, Mountain View, California.
And we still have more news for you here on the program. To stay with us, here's what's ahead. A young artist in South Africa finds a way to turn a simple piece of string into a work of art.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
And let's return to South Africa, where one artist is creating what is known as string art. It was invented in the 19th century England and was then popularized in the 1970s as a decorative art. CGTN's Elisa Njamela has more on the story.
String art has been around for a while now. It was popular in the 70s, but is now making a comeback as a simple and popular way of making one's artwork. String art is inspired by geometric shapes. The main materials are wooden board, nails and colorful threads. Thread is coiled around a grid of nails hammered into the wooden board to form a stunning end product. Tshego Matlowe is a string artist. She has mastered the technique and able to work with designs that customers come up with.
So with string art, what happens is that I use the main materials, which are the board. I usually use the pine wood board. I use the nails and colorful threads. So when making the string art, I take the thread, it's wound around a grid of nails, which are hammered into the board. So string art is very, very unique art and very therapeutic. I really like it.
Threading and colors are the main things that attracted Matlowe to string art.
The moment I saw string art, I was actually captured by the colors and the threading itself on top of the wood. So, and the fact that I haven't seen such art in our country, because I had to make a bit of a research on the internet just to check.
Matlowe sometimes sits back and marvels at her own creations.
And the work that I'm proud of so far is the board that I made of an African woman. An African woman, if you can just look at the picture, you can see that she's confident, she's comfortable in her own continent as an African woman. So that's the one that I love the most, especially since I'm a woman and it's also Women's Month. So yeah, that's an excellent picture that I like.
She now wants to create string art installations in hotels and other big establishments. Elisa Njamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And let's take a look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. Egypt hopes to make a breakthrough in athletics at the African Games.
Africa, where champions are made